Good evening. I think we'll go ahead and get started if everyone is ready to go. My name is Joe McGuire. I'm a board member of Leadership-Asheville Forum and an attorney with the McGuire, Wood & Bissett law firm in downtown Asheville. Leadership-Asheville Forum is comprised of graduates of the Leadership-Asheville seniors, and other leaders in the community. And if anyone hasn't joined, we'll have membership forms out on the table outside. I wanted to let you know what's coming up with the forum. We put on monthly critical issues luncheons and an occasional evening forum. Our purpose is to connect members of the forum. They're usually a little over about 200 at any one time with critical issues. And we're usually on the fourth Wednesday of the month, unless it's right up against Thanksgiving, as is true this year. Our next two critical issue luncheons, one will be on October 23, and that will be two representatives of the Dogwood Health Trust talking about what will be done with all of that money to benefit our communities. And then on November 20, we have County Manager Averill Pender, who will talk about how she's done since she's come on board with the county. And then we'll have a holiday party on Wednesday, December 4 at Biltmore Lake. I wanted to thank OLLI and Dr. Catherine Frank, who is running about, for letting us have this evening here. We've had a very good partnership with OLLI for a number of years in terms of working together on evening forums. I wanted to give you a thought about the plan for the evening before I start introducing one of our speakers. I'm going to introduce them right before each of them speaks. I want to say a couple of words about the topic, North Carolina public higher education. Then each panelist will present for 10, maybe a little bit more than that. My wife Jean's going to hit a chime if they hit 12 minutes, just so we'll all know. And after that, because we are a forum, we will have question and answers from you all. I have a couple of questions if you all run out, but looking at this crowd, I don't think that's going to happen. And when we have some handheld mics, so if you want to ask a question when we get to that point, just raise your hand, and our president, Laurel Jernigan, will bring that around to you, and then you can ask your question. We would ask that you state your name before you ask the question, and if you want it answered by one or more of particular members of the panel, please indicate who that would be. And we would ask to keep it as a forum, but if you can ask your question as a question, not make it a statement, and we'd prefer a question that's about a sentence long rather than a paragraph. Our topic tonight is dear to many of us, both those of us who are natives in this area, those who've grown up in the state, and certainly those who've moved here, because what North Carolina public higher education means is really the future of the state. North Carolina has a university system. You'll hear more details about it, but it has 17 campuses and enrolls nearly 240,000 students. The North Carolina has 58 community colleges, and those community colleges enroll about 221,000, counting as FTEs. So at any one time, we're going to have close to 450,000 or a little bit more students in the university system or in our community colleges. Tonight, we're going to focus on public higher education, but that's not to say that private higher education is not terribly important as well. We're just going to focus on the publics tonight. I wanted to mention a book, if you're interested in what's going on with the private colleges in North Carolina. It's a little book, came out last year, called Pivot, and it's by a couple of folks who do educational consulting, and it talks about how private colleges need to be nimble and look towards educating students of the future, not so much what we've been doing in the past. What it has to say about the privates could also be very relevant to the public universities and colleges. Two facts I wanted to kind of start the night off with. One is that, and these are things you know, but the statistics are dramatic. One is that the cost of college has been and continues to rise. The data shows that in North Carolina, there are 1.2 million of our residents who have student debt. And the amount of that student debt totals $44 billion. Kind of had to double check that to make sure it wasn't million, but $44 billion. That's a very heavy debt load, both on the students and the parents from whose households they originate. So the cost of college is rising. The other statistic is that the financial value of college is also rising. So that a new study, I think by the Pew Research, indicated that if you have a bachelor's degree, your average salary at certain years out will be $56,000 versus if you have only a high school education, it would be $31,000. So that's a very dramatic difference per year. And of course, that only talks about the financial value of a college university education, not the broadening of horizons and the deepening of skills that will be necessary to deal in the complicated world of business and government and even municipal regulations that we deal in. So tonight we have 4 speakers with a wealth of experience in public higher education. I think you have the handout that kind of indicates who they'll be, and they'll be in the order that I'm going to indicate right now. First, we'll have Lou Bissett, then Paul Fulton, then Emma Battle, and then Dr. Bill Cedarberg. And I'll introduce each one of them before they speak. So let me start with Lou Bissett, who is a law partner of mine. Lou's a graduate of Wake Forest University, of UNC School of Law, and of the University of Virginia School of Business. He's formerly a mayor of Asheville back when the Renaissance, I think, was first getting going.
I call it the days of Camelot. Joe's never gone along with me on that.
I think my other partner, Dick Wood, called it that, and he was even earlier. But it's amazing the images we get in our own heads, isn't it? Lou is also chair of the board of Western Carolina Industries, which is a group that very active in the western part of the state. He has been a member of the boards of trustees both of Western Carolina University and Wake Forest University. And he is a current member of the UNC Board of Governors and is the just past chair of that group. And if you were in Raleigh or Charlotte, or if I were there, we would know more about what's happening in Raleigh, particularly with the Board of Governors. So in doing my research, I've had a lot of information in the Raleigh News and Observer and in the Charlotte Observer, but that doesn't filter as much here. So we're delighted to start off with Lou Bissett, who will talk about the university system, the Board of Governors, and how we might improve higher education, public higher education in North Carolina. Lou?
Thank you, Joe, and thank all of you for being here tonight. This is an incredibly important topic for both for our university system and for the state of North Carolina. I wanted to start out by first talking a little bit about the UNC system, because in my mind it's the #1 system of public higher education in the United States. And I think a lot of people would agree with me with that. But I wanted to know, a lot of you have lived here a long time. You know a lot about the university and the different institutions, but I'm sure that some of you don't. So I wanted to ask a couple of questions of you as we started out. What is the most diverse campus in the UNC system, student body-wise? Does anybody have any idea? No, it's UNC Pembroke, down in the eastern part of the state. It's a very interesting university that was started as a Native American school, and I've grown to really like that place while I've been on the Board of Governors. They've just got some great kids down there. All right, what would you think are the fastest growing campuses in the UNC system? And I'm talking, and I'm going to just give you these for 2018 to 2019. What? Close. But last year, Elizabeth City State University and UNC Pembroke and Western Carolina University grew at the most rapid percentage rate of students. Now, I wonder why that was, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. That's because of a program called NC Promise that the legislature enacted, where those three campuses, their tuition is now $500 a semester for in-state students and $2,500 a semester for out-of-state students. So you can imagine that they've had some really good growth. Now, if you go back a little further, I would point to UNC Charlotte. It's had a big part of the system's growth over the last 5 or 6 years have come from that university, and it's got about 30,000 students now, and people project that to be even bigger. And another institution in our system, UNC Wilmington, is growing very fast, and I wonder why that is. That's because people like to go to school at the beach, I think. But it's a great institution too. What is the largest historically black college or university in the North Carolina system? It's not in the North Carolina system, but in the United States. That would be North Carolina A&T University in Greensboro, a tremendous engineering school and an incredibly good school. With the chancellor there has been there a number of years, and he's a particularly competent individual. Has done a great job. Now I know you're going to get this one right. What is the system's only public liberal arts university? Oh. No, oh, no. No more to be said with that. Just a couple of other things. Well, one other thing that who would happen to know which one of the UNC System's institutions has as its mascot the Fighting Pickle?
I know that.
You got it. You got it. And that's another great, the School of the Arts, the North Carolina School of the Arts in Winston-Salem. And I finally had to beg them to give me one of their little pens. It has this pickle up like this. It's really good. But that school is known worldwide. And one other interesting institution I wanted to mention to you that's in the system. All of them are very interesting, but the North Carolina School of Science and Math, which is a high school. It's a boarding high school. It's located in Durham, has about 600 students, and they're building a second campus in Morganton in the west, and that's going to open, I think, in 2021 with about 300 boarding students. So that's a unique institution in itself, and I hope you all will have a chance to go over there. They're building a beautiful school in a great location in Morganton. We've got our two flagship universities, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, which is an incredible institution. It's been in the top 3 nationally for the last 19 years, and Paul can tell you a lot about it because he's had a lot to do with their success. North Carolina State University, incredible engineering school, and the largest campus in the system with about 36,000 students. And you've got a couple of the regionals. We've talked about UNC Charlotte, East Carolina University in Greenville, UNC Greensboro is also they're over 20,000 students now. So I won't go through them all, but every school has a unique part to it, and it has in a lot of cases the demographics of each institution are different and are great, and I think that's what makes our system such an incredible system, because You start out in Cullowhee and you end up down at Elizabeth City State, and all in between, we've got fine institutions that that can meet the needs of just about any student in North Carolina who wants to go to college. And we were talking about, and we'll talk more about tuition, but just to give you an example, our system is unbelievably affordable. Elizabeth City State University, for example, their tuition and fees, $3,259 a year. And that ranges up, and the highest university in our system, other than the School of the Arts, which I won't throw in there, is North Carolina State University, whose tuition and fees amount to $8,895 a year. Now that's a bargain, I can tell you that, and we should all be very proud of that. Our system, as Joe said, has about 240,000 students in it, has a $10 billion budget, annual budget, and about $2.8 billion of that this past year came from the state of North Carolina. And although we grouse about the state and everything, they do provide a sizable amount of funding for our university system. It has dropped since the Great Recession back in '08 and '09 on a per student basis, but in total amount, it is now caught back up to where it was back then. There are also a number of ancillary entities in the university that you don't think about. UNC Healthcare is a major healthcare provider across the state. They have, in fact, they manage Pardee Hospital over in Hendersonville. The Brody School of Medicine down in Greenville, along with the UNC School of Medicine in Chapel Hill, are two of the finest medical schools in the Southeast. UNC TV, which we all watch. I hope you all got to watch the country music special the last couple of weeks. That was incredible. UNC Press, and then we all know about the North Carolina Arboretum, which we have here, which is also a part of the university system. The governing boards, and we're going to talk about this. I'm just going to briefly summarize because I don't know when Gene's going to ring that bell. But the system is governed by, right now, 24 members of the Board of Governors. And this board is appointed by the state legislature, 12 by the Senate, and 12 by the House. And then at each university, at each institution, there's a board of trustees of 13 members, 8 of which are appointed by the Board of Governors, 4 by the legislature, and then, of course, there is one student member on each of those boards, and they are voting members on the campus boards. I was a big fan of Margaret Spellings, who recently left the university. She implemented a strategic plan called Higher Expectations, and really it focused on access and affordability and student success. And the reports from what she's accomplished in those areas, even just in the first year that they've been able to measure it, have been incredible. For example, the graduation rates for 5 years have gone from 65.7% to 70% last year. So when you think of all the students, that's pretty important. So affordability, the board has held tuition rates level without any increases for the last 3 or 4 years. And also the legislature implemented a plan whereby if you enroll at UNC-Asheville this year, then your tuition will not increase for the next 4 years. Now, if you stick around for 6 years, like Bill did, they would increase it. So So we have made some progress on affordability and access. Finally, I'm just going to quickly talk about the governing boards, which I've been a member of for going on my 9th year down in Chapel Hill. And it was interesting. I went on that board in 2011 when the Republicans took control of the legislature. And at that time, they had 32 members. And 16 were appointed by each 16 by the Senate, 16 by the House. And for that 2-year period, we had 16 new appointees. We're mostly all Republicans. And we had 16 former appointees that were mostly all Democrats. And believe me, that was the best 2 years that I've spent on that Board of Governors. And because I'm concerned, and you'll hear a lot more from Paul about the diversity of our Board of Governors. And I was looking at it today, and I'm talking about geographic diversity. You know, these universities are spread all across the state. Well, right now, we've got 7 members. The board has been reduced down to 24, and we had a member resign last week, so we're really at 23. But from the east of Raleigh, we had 7 members. From the Triangle, you know, where the legislature is and everything, where the center of the university is, they had 11 members. There were 2 members from Charlotte, 1 member from Winston-Salem, 1 member from Greensboro, and guess how many west of Charlotte? 1, Carolyn Coward, who lives here in Asheville. And but I'm over the hills. And just a couple of other things. Race. You know, we have a lot of black students in our universities, and we have a large black population in our state. And they need to be represented on our boards. The Board of Governors has 21 white people and 2 black people. Gender. Here's another problem. We've got 18 males and 5 females right now. And as I indicated, I think at this point, there are no Democrats. I think there may be one independent, and all the rest are Republicans. That is not right. And one final thing, which is most important to me, is that we have. I wrote this down. I know it. We have about half of our members are lobbyists. In other words, they represent, you know, companies before the legislature. So guess what? If I'm a lobbyist and my well-being is dependent on my relationship with the legislature, I think I'm going to do about whatever they tell me to do. So that's a problem as well. And in some states, they ban lobbyists. And I'm going to, for the rest of the time I've got on here, not on this meeting, but on this earth, I'm going to see if we can't figure out how to ban lobbyists from serving on boards like this in our state, because this is an independent, it should be an independent board that belongs to all the people of North Carolina. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Paul Fulton. Paul is former president of Sara Lee Corporation, chair of the Bassett Furniture Industries. He was a former member of the Winston-Salem State University Board of Trustees and was dean of the UNC School of Business. He's a former member of the UNC Chapel Hill Board of Trustees and a former member of the UNC Board of Governors. And currently he is chair of Higher Ed Works. Paul Fulton.
Ooh, I'm going to come over here if I can.
That's great.
Thank you, Joe and Lou. That was quite a summary. I came over here because I don't trust myself for wandering around, so I'm going to try to sort of follow a script, which hopefully will give you the thoughts that I have put together. Joe mentioned I retired from Surly, which I did in December of 93. I was, at that time, what I considered a young, old, 59 years old. I was living in Chicago, and I really probably did that because, number one, I was ready to get back to North Carolina. I'd been there 8 years. I had a great love of the university, but also was a staunch believer in the value of a higher education to every individual. There was an opportunity to come back and make a contribution to that. But and I've had a great experience and a lot of experience. But I really believe that the university system that Lou so eloquently described is the most important asset we have in this state. And we have, and it is, as Lou said, if not the best, certainly one of the best. To talk about education, I want to quote a couple of people that you will be familiar with. One is Benjamin Franklin, who said, "An investment in knowledge pays the best interest." That's hard to argue with. And John F. Kennedy, who said, "In our democracy, every young person should have an equal opportunity to obtain a higher education, regardless of his station in life or financial means." A college degree brings better job opportunities, it brings higher earnings, and even improved health and longevity. Higher education also promotes democracy, it helps sustain growth, and it contributes to a reduction in crime and contributes to lower welfare and prison costs. Now, the economic benefit, as Joe said earlier, is clear, it's obvious. Over a lifetime, a college degree will earn an individual, on average, between $1 million and $1.5 million more than he would earn with just a high school degree. But also the social benefits are enormous. Andrew Kelly, who works for Lou at the Board of Governors, a senior vice president for strategy and policy at the University of North Carolina System Office. And he told the Western Carolina University Board of Trustees during his September 5th presentation that the demand for workers with a bachelor's degree or higher is likely to increase in North Carolina. Now, according to him, and according to the Georgetown Center of Education and Workforce, 38% of jobs will require such a degree by 2027. Today, only 33% of our workers currently have that. So we obviously have a long ways to go. Community colleges are also vital, so very vital. They have two excellent career paths. Number one is an on-ramp to a 4-year college degree, and that's being more and more applied, and it's a part of helping reduce the cost of a college education. Number two, you can develop skill training for a specific job. For example, electrician, a welder, mechanic, programmer, and as well as many others. And we have an excellent community college system, one of the best in the country. But are we nurturing it properly and invested in the way we should, like other states, even neighbors like Tennessee? And I'll tell you a little bit later about some of the innovative things they're doing. Our universities and our community college are vitally necessary to attract new industry and for the growth of existing industry. Higher education has always been important to this state. We value it tremendously. Just look at the results of two major bond referendums that we've had in the last 20 years. First was a $3.1 billion bond issue in the year 2000. It passed by, I think, somewhere around a 75% approval rate. It was the biggest bond issue there's ever been in this state. It was the biggest education bond issue ever in the country and had the highest rate of approval of anything we've ever had. And then recently, in 2016, we had a $2 billion bond issue, and it was at a time when people were skeptical. Bond issues were not always being passed or considered favorably. That bond issue passed on a 2-to-1 basis. Surprising, given the environment we're in. Or look at the great private institutions in this state. You have Duke, you have Wake Forest, you have Davis, and you have Elon, and I could certainly add a high point to that as well as many others. That's not by accident. This is a hub of higher education. None of the states around us have private institutions like it. Dan Blue, who at one time was the chair of the Duke trustees, He said it has a lot to do with a first-rate public university, that they work together, they complement each other. Duke and Carolina have tremendous rivalries on the field, but the collaboration that goes on between those two universities on research or healthcare is remarkable. This state understands the value of higher education and a college degree. My future NC, a Commission on Comprehensive Education Attainment, established by Margaret Sellers, and as Lou said, I was a great fan of Margaret. She was a great loss to this state. But it set an attainment goal of 2 million by 2030. And by attainment, we mean either a skill credential, like a welder or programmer, or a 4-year college degree. This would give North Carolina an attainment rate in excess of 60% for adults, but our current rate is 47%. That is vitally important. But how do we get there? What is our plan? What sort of resources are we willing to invest to reach this goal? I hate to tell you, but there ain't no plan. There's no allocation of resources. There's no identification of resources. What it takes, like one of the biggest places, it's a large number of people out here that have maybe a few hours short of a degree. You could reach those veterans or another. There are opportunities like it, but there's not a plan that addresses those, that holds the legislature's feet to the fire to provide the resources to get where we know we need to be. Now, I believe there are two major issues in education facing this state today, and they must be addressed. Number one, we as a state, and I'm going to show you why in a minute, are underinvested in education at all levels. And I repeat that, at all levels. And number two, the governance system that Lou just talked about for our university is broke. It's broken. It does not work the way it was intended to for some of the reasons that Lou just said. Now let's talk about the first. In 2018, only 23% of kids of pre-K age had access to pre-K education. Now, the implication of that is enormous. A pre-K education is a direct predictor of third grade reading level. Third grade reading level is a direct predictor of college readiness, also prison capacity. They tell me if you know your third grade reading level, you can project how much capacity you need. So it's vitally important. Only 23% of our kids have access. Now, we did went over and visit with Frank Porter Graham Institute, who was an authority on pre-K. Now, they say that number runs up to the high 50s, maybe 60% when you look at the kids that are in faith-based schools, but they say they're nowhere near the quality of our public pre-K. Our public pre-K has high ratings on quality. It has very low ratings on reach and how many people it accommodates. Let's look at K through 12. Spending per student in K through 12 ranks 37th nationally. It's below South Carolina. It's below Alabama. It's below West Virginia. And as we always say, thank God for thank God for Mississippi. It's one of the few that are below us. We've made significant strides recently in teacher pay. This current budget, once it's approved, would take us up to 29th. We were in the 40th. But we need to do more. We were 19th in 2001. But at that time, we had a 2,600 gap between our average teacher pay and the national average. Today, even though we're 29th, that gap is $7,600. So other states are doing more. They're doing a lot more than we are in the area of education. We lag South Carolina in areas such as class size, counselors, social workers, nurses, safety, you name it. South Carolina, even though they lag in teacher pay, they actually spend more per student in K-12 than we do. Community college. The latest budget invested significantly in programs, matching skills development to job availability, but it did virtually nothing to address deficiencies in compensation. Most faculty are part-time. They have to be. They're holding another job. And average full-time pay at $48,500 is actually less than we pay our K-12 teachers. Now, that's a bit of a disgrace, I think, and it's no wonder we have trouble attracting the kind of people we want teaching community college. In the meantime, Tennessee, California, Maryland, and Rhode Island, and this surprised me till we did the research on it. They are all offering free tuition for certain aspects of a community college education day. I'm told we have a few counties that are doing the same, that on their own are reaching out to make community college free. In Tennessee, just right over the border here, adults are eligible for free tuition at the state's community colleges and technical schools, as long as they don't already have an associate or bachelor's degree. It's expansion of a program that started in 2015, so it's obviously been successful. And New Mexico just announced free tuition for community college and four-year colleges. And I didn't know this, but New York's been doing that since April of 2017. So it's coming, folks. And it's time North Carolina became a leader rather than a follower in something like this. Isn't it time we looked at something like this? NC Promise that Lou talked about was a great first step, with $500 tuition for in-state students at Western Carolina, Elizabeth City, and no wonder they got more growth than any other campus. It's a great success. It's well received. Enrollment's up substantially, but we need to do more. Other states are doing more. It's not enough to rest just on that. Where are the visionaries in this state today? Where are the Terry Sanders, the Mark Bass Knights? We just don't seem to have that kind of aspiration to be a leader in education in this state. As for the universities, we're not keeping pace, and we are a well-funded university. Don't get me wrong. We are well-funded relative to other states, but we're not keeping pace with the growth of the state. We're the 9th largest state in the union now, having just passed Michigan. Remarkable. Our universities have, as mentioned earlier, right at 240,000 students were enrolled this fall. That's up 9% since 2013. Yet our state support, and as Lou said, on a per-student basis, is $3,000 or 17% below what it was in pre-recession level. Folks, that ain't good enough. We can do better than that. Access and affordability are crucial. Student debt is too high, more than 3 times in North Carolina what it was pre-recession. But because of the tuition rates that Lou talked about, we're better off than most of the country. But it's still too high. There are lots of ways to address that. More state support, particularly in need-based aid. In fact, that's exactly where it needs to be. Better graduation rates, better throughput. There's an interesting program in Winston-Salem State I happen to be familiar with. They raised their admission standards, and the ones that did not qualify were funneled over to Forsyth Tech. After 2 years, if they met certain standards, they were eligible to transfer into Winston-Salem State. Graduation in that group is higher than the rest. So it's been a big success. It's a way of utilizing community colleges in order to lower costs and up our graduation rates. More extensive use of online. Now, I don't know enough about online, but I gotta believe that if more online courses were available online, we'd not only lower costs, but we could increase our graduation rate. Look hard at administrative overhead, but you got to be careful. There are a lot of student services in there, such as counseling, also safety. Title IX and the safety is a big part of what that is. So you got to be careful what you do, but it's certainly the systems part is worth looking at. Speaker Moore, I happen to know and consider a good friend, tells me, Paul, we're spending more on education than we ever have. And I say to him, you're damn right. We should be. We're a growing state. We're the 9th largest state in the country today. We're simply not keeping up with other states, what other states are doing in education. And the evidence is everywhere. In addition, our university faculty salaries are at or near the very bottom. Each of these 16 campuses has a peer group. Each of them is either last or right next to last on faculty compensation versus their peer group. When I was a trustee at Chapel Hill long ago, and I want to say, we were striving for the 75th percentile of our peer group. Today, Chapel Hill is at the bottom, the very last of their peer group. So it didn't used to be this way. And if we think we are going to be able to retain and attract the top faculty we always have, then certainly it's got to be addressed. So I say again, we're underinvested in education at all levels. Other states are doing more. Now, as for governance, I'd like to read you an op-ed piece that appeared in the newsletter of How It Worked this week. The title of it is Yet Another UNC Leadership Change. With the resignation of Harry Smith as chair of the UNC Board of Governors, we have yet another in a series of leadership changes across the University of North Carolina system. This revolving door among leaders of our state public universities, which keeps spinning, even as the system embarks on a search for a new president, speaks to poor governance and an disturbing lack of stability. By next year, the UNC system could have placeholders in as many as 7 key positions. Number 1, president of our UNC system. Number 2, the chair of the board. Now, I know we just elected, but that election is just through June. So again, you're really looking at a placeholder until a longer-term chair is elected. A chancellor at UNC Chapel Hill is an interim chancellor. Chancellor at East Carolina is an interim chancellor. Chancellor at UNC Shaw is leaving at the end of this year. Chancellor at Fayetteville State is leaving, I think, at the end of this year.
Left, yeah.
And the chancellor at the School of the Arts, we have an interim chancellor there. Now, they're all for different reasons, without question, but they are a sign of too much turnover and instability at the top. Change can be good, and some turnover is to be expected in any organization, but the cumulative effect of this is not. This amount of churn is not a picture of stability. As interim UNC system president Bill Roper said, we need to settle things down. We need to settle things down, and we need to get in a place where we can attract the kind of talent and leadership that historically we've done. It will be difficult to complete the vital task of preparing our state's workforce if we cannot attract top talent for our leadership position. Now, just think of filling the chancellor position at Chapel Hill today. With all the turmoil we've had, now how rich do you think that talent pool is going to be? I think we all know it is not going to be what it could be or should be. In addition, we have continuous meddling and micromanagement into the affairs of our campus. Things like Silent Sam and the multiple issues at East Carolina. I don't know whether you pick up that up here, but there have been numerous issues of problems. I feel sure that all of them would have been resolved quicker and with less controversy at the campus level. And the turnover above is, in several cases, was directly driven by action of the Board of Governors. I know for certain Margaret Spelling was, Carol Fulton, and you can name others. Well, they wanted East Carolina, and there may be, who knows the reason of the others are leaving. And I don't mind saying that our primary problems of micromanagement and disruptive action comes from the Senate appointees. So how about solutions? First, we must depoliticize the selection process for Board of Governors and Board of Trustees. Maybe give the governor some appointments. Maybe designate certain from each party and independents. Maybe give it by geographic. But we had that at one time, and it seemed to have worked better. I was on the Board of Governors. In fact, I was actually a Republican appointed by a Democrat, which was not unusual back in those days when Lou came on. But I had a break one time. James Stansel, who covered for the Board of Governors of the New Observer, came and asked me, he says, Paul, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. She said, what's your political affiliation? I said, I'm a registered Republican. She said, who are the, I said, I don't really know. I know Peter Hahn is, and I named 2 or 3. Truth is, you didn't know. You really did not know the political affiliation because the board just wasn't that political as it clearly is today. We need to look at funding on a per-student basis, not just how much we're funding, for all levels of education. And we need to look particularly on K through 12 and pre-K, what other states are doing. We need to do more. People talk about reform. Reform is one thing, and it's good, but reform, when underfunded, is not effective. And once again, both these issues and remedies lie with the power of our legislature to solve, and they are the only people that can do it. So they need to be held accountable to correct the issues of governance and also of funding in this state. Folks, I thank you. I'm glad to be here. It's a subject that's dear to my heart, and I know it is to a lot here. And I do believe if this state is going to be a leader, it's going to have to be a leader in education. And we are far from it today. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, especially for your candor.
Somebody have accused me of not doing
Pretty candid guy.
Our next speaker is Emma Battle. Emma is a graduate of Duke University and received her MBA from Harvard Business School. She is the president and CEO of Higher EdWorks and is also a subject matter expert for the My Future NC Commission. Emma Battle.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. How are you? I'm going to do something a little different. I have a PowerPoint, and so we're going to have some, slides that we're going to go through. I'm going to take you through some statistics, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about those statistics, and it's really to get you thinking. Based on what you've just heard these two gentlemen say, I think it's going to be quite interesting. First, 60+%. That is the percentage of graduates in this country, not just the state, who graduate from public universities. So the public universities are really doing the work to get people to a degree. $355,000. That is the net benefit to society from a college graduate, from taxes, and from not taking public welfare. It doesn't include all the revenue that some people generate as a result of being a business owner. It doesn't include charitable donations. It's the net benefit because they are employed, they pay taxes, they don't need the public assistance. It's $355,000. 75%. That is the likely percentage of college graduates who are likely to vote. So we talked a little bit about some of the benefits of a college degree. One of them is that people who receive post-secondary education are more likely to be civically minded and active in voting. 87%. That is an approximate number of people who are incarcerated that have no post-secondary education. In fact, many of them, around 57%, don't even have a GED or a high school diploma. So the people who are in the nation's prisons and jails don't have higher education, don't have maybe a full high school education. So there's a direct link between people who get some post-secondary education and not going to jail. There's a direct link. $30,800. $30,800. That is how much we as taxpayers spend every year per inmate in North Carolina to take care of somebody who's in prison. So we hear about the expanding prison rolls, and we talk about people who, we want them to be independent living. We don't want socialism. But we're paying $30,000 a year to keep somebody in prison. That's what we're paying. $19,323. That was the fully loaded tuition board expenses for a UNC-Asheville student in 2017. So that was everything, the full cost to go to UNC-Asheville. So compare that to $30,000 a year that we're paying for somebody to be in jail versus $19,000 that we're not paying for somebody to get an education. So with those facts in mind, I'm going to tell you about what we do at Higher Ed Works. So at Higher Ed Works, our mission is to educate North Carolinians about the value of a public higher education. We have a fabulous post-secondary system too. Community colleges are awesome, our university system's awesome. We have a national reputation for being an education state. And our university system is a strong reason for that reputation. A lot of North Carolinians have taken that for granted. And we've been growing so fast as a state, we're getting all these people in, they don't really understand the value of this gem in our state. So, Paul Fulton had this vision 6 years ago that he wanted to figure out a way to let people know about our valuable university system and our valuable community college system. So he came to the digital agency that I worked at. He said, how can we reach these people? So that was the beginning of Higher Ed Works. What we'd like to see is a better educated North Carolina population. We want to see increased grassroots, everyday people's support for our systems of public higher education. We want to see continued legislative support for the system, as well as sustained investment in the university and the ideas and jobs and research that flow from it. So here's, we had our model is we reach regular people with our information, and then we want them, whoops, I don't know if I did that, or what? What happened?
She just stepped out.
Let's see.
That's really not what happened.
Help, help.
Well, anyway, I'll keep talking until we get it. But we would like to see North Carolinians really embrace our system of public higher education. And we would like them to go think about how these systems get funded, think about the value they have in their lives, and to do self-advocacy. We don't have lobbyists or people who come in and lobby the legislators. We think it's better that the population understand the value and that they make those decisions. The slide that comes after that, let me see, okay, it's coming back up. Okay. So, thank you very much. What's interesting is how many people realize that we have a constitutional mandate for the legislature to provide public higher education at an affordable rate. How many people know that? Yes, you guys are good. Most people think, okay, pre-K through 12, yes, that's public education. But most people decide once you get past your 12th grade, then that's kind of on the families and the individual. In North Carolina, we're one of 3 states that have a constitutional mandate that the state should provide for the people of North Carolina, as far as practicable, free of expense, college. That is in our Constitution, and our citizens are not aware of that. One of the reasons that we are such a well-known state for post-secondary education is because we've had this in our Constitution for over 100 years. And we have been living up to this for the most part. But what's happening is this. We talked about student debt, is we're starting to see student debt creep up to the national average. We used to be ranked number 3 in the country, the UNC system, for per student funding from the state. The state of North Carolina used to provide funding, and we were number 3 in the country. Since the recession, we have slipped to number 6. That's still outstanding, excellent, wonderful. We are still thankful for that. We just are concerned that it can continue to go further. And as we see what's happening with student debt, a lot of that cut has been passed on to families in the way of tuition increases, and they've gone and they've gotten student loans. These are facts that our families don't understand. Well, what's the link? So what we do at Higher Ed Works is we publish information like this, and we let them know what's going on. I'm going to share with you a video. This is a video of a student who is at Surrey Community College. And what we do is we try to get content that is relevant to the community that we're talking to. We talk to people using social media. We spend a lot of time on Facebook. Let's see if I can get on here and find it. Whoops. All right. I'm going to go back to that video. I only have 2 more slides, so. I think it's on Firefox. All right. So I'm going to show you this video. And it gives you an idea of some of the content that we create, because we find that people love video more than they want to read. So we really try to reach people with what they like.
The reason I became an instructor at specifically Surrey is because I began at Surrey. So my educational level is that I am a nurse practitioner now. I work for Hugh Chatham, and I'm also a nurse educator here at Surrey Community College. But I began here at Surrey. My community here is here at Surrey. I'm the first in my immediate family to go to college. My mom probably has about a 3rd grade literacy level. So I wanted to be here because I wanted to inspire other people in this community to do what I have done. I got my associate's degree here at Surrey, went on to get my bachelor's degree, and then my master's and FNP, family nurse practitioner.
Quick, short. We don't spend a lot of time, talking to people, but people really connect when they see somebody in their community whose mom was a 3rd grade literacy level. Laurie told us a story about when she was growing up, when it rained outside, it would rain inside. That's the kind of house she grew up in. And now she's a nursing instructor. She's got a master's degree. And she's back in her community making a difference. But this is what a college education can do. So we tell these kinds of stories. We also feature the chancellors in the university programs. So if you get a chance, I hope you can check out our content. We have a pretty big reach, and I'm going to just share a little bit about that. If I can get up here to that slide. So far, we've reached, since we've been in business, about 8 million people. A lot of the people that we target, some of them are outside of North Carolina, but they're very interested in our content, or they went to school here and they've moved away. So we've reached 8 million people over 6 years, and they've taken about 2 million actions, meaning they've watched the video, they've commented on our Facebook post, they've shared it with a friend, they've done something with that content. It's very effective. As you can see, our cost per click is 45 cents versus an industry average of $1.06. So the content that we create about our universities and community colleges is very interesting to people. And so we are reaching a lot of people, and they are very interested in our content. And that's what we do because we have a wonderful gym in North Carolina. We have an excellent higher education system. And I hope you will go to our website, Higher Ed Works, sign up for our newsletter so you can get our weekly newsletter. Or if you want to give me your email address, I'll take it and I'll sign you up because I'd like for you guys to know what's going on. And that is my presentation. Thank you very much.
Good job.
Thank you, Emma. How many here before tonight had heard of Higher Ed Works? So probably most of us have not, and it's good to know about that resource. Our next speaker is Dr. Bill Cederberg. Bill is a Minnesota native, graduated from Mankato State University. He earned a master's and a doctorate in political science from Michigan State University. He served in the Michigan State Senate for over 12 years. He's been president of 2 higher education colleges, universities, president of Ferris State University in Michigan and Utah Valley State College. After that, he was commissioner of Utah System of Higher Education, and then bringing him back more to our university system, he served as interim chancellor at University of North Carolina at Wilmington. And he's currently a senior scholar of the American Association of State Colleges and Universities, and you're getting a handout from which you'll speak. Bill?
Thank you very much, Joe. You'll realize I'm going to turn over some of my time to Mike Dem. Try that one. Hello? Is that coming through at all? All right, so it's probably, you don't want it too amplified, you know, this bad voice. You probably say, oh, don't want to do that. At any rate, it's great to have you here tonight. I am in awe a little bit because Lou Bissett, when I was interim chancellor at Wilmington, Lou provided such great leadership for the system as they went through kind of a challenging time. Lou, thanks for that. Paul, you've been such an outstanding leader in the state. Thanks for all that you have done. And Emma, what you're doing with 6 million contacts at 20 cents a piece or something, very impressive. So I'm probably the weakest link in your presentation, but I do have a slideshow, so we're going to get started with that. Where's the clicker? This one. Oh, here we go.
Well, now we gotta, let me see if I can fix your.
There we go.
All right.
So, bad news, good news. The bad news is my voice isn't in very good shape. It's a lot better than it was in Monday. We had a conference call to get organized, and I could only speak. We're very worried. And yet, I think they thought they could divide up our time. And consequently, I'm going to be this very great speaker, and then I'm going to ask my MC to share a little bit about my future NC. So you had a little bit of an introduction to that. I just want to point out one thing here, and that is I did have the opportunity to be the founding chair.
Testing.
I don't even need to hold the button. Hold it closer. Okay. I did chair an effort in the Midwest to create the Midwest Higher Education Commission. We got 11 states to pass identical pieces of legislation to create a compact of the 11 Midwestern states. And then I chaired that, and it was fun to go back 25 years later to see all the good work that they had done. But more significantly, last week we got our first grandchild, and I was tempted to throw some pictures up there, but I said, no, I've gone through that with too many pictures from Keith Bell and Frank Mullins and others that are in the audience, so I won't do that. So the good news is very limited observations, and then I'll turn it over to Mike. I think that as you look at the bigger scenario, what's going on in higher education, there are two major forces that are driving what's going on these days, and it's certainly impacting here in North Carolina. One is the state's financial disinvestment. At one point, states considered a mandatory obligation to provide higher education to their students, but we're seeing an increasing anti-government attitude. I mentioned the Midwest Commission because we had a great speaker from the Midwestern Council of Governments right after Trump got elected, and his theme was, it was totally predictable because they had been tracking the percentage of people that were just anti-government. They were not supportive of government doing much of anything, and that extrapolation carried over, and that trend is very much alive. You also find if you're in the state legislature, your ability to move is pretty marginal because of mandatory expenses, and tuition becomes a safety valve for budget cuts when things go down. You can always say, well, let's just go and increase tuition, and we don't have to make those unfortunate cuts at the state level. So I worked with Tom Harnish, who's with ASCU, and I was intrigued with his article that recently came out, Trending to Zero, the latest impact of total state investments. The national people expect there's going to be 12 states that ultimately will end up with absolutely zero public investment. Michigan is probably going to be one of those that I came from. They're now funding their institutions at about 20% of the total expenditure. We're at about 60-some% here in North Carolina. So this investment is happening throughout the country, and it's certainly happening here. You've had a lot of charts thrown at you. I found this kind of interesting because it showed the recessions and the impact of state funding. And the recession hits, the funds are cut for universities, then it builds back up, and then they're cut. The last recession, the states have not yet recompensated higher education for those cuts. North Carolina is getting close, but the states throughout the country have a lot more to do. Now, Emma mentioned that we're doing quite well here in funding per student. You can see that among all 50 states, we're at the positive end of the spectrum. I was really impressed with that when I got here because our tuition is so much lower. To go here at UNC-Asheville, what did you say, about $20,000 totally? to go to my school that I was president of in Ferris State University, it's now about $26,000, and it's not, don't let this go out of the room, it's nowhere near the quality of UNC-Asheville. I don't say that to anybody else. Okay. This chart kind of points out how, as the state pressure is on the legislature, tuition fills the gap. So if you go back to the left-hand side, in 1981, the students were paying only 16% of the total bill in higher education through tuition. By last year, it was 34%. So you see, as the states are disinvesting the tuition, students are picking up on that, and then the student debt gets increased dramatically. So the second force that is hitting higher education, I think, is this increasing public hostility towards higher education itself. Nancy Cable has her hands full convincing people that liberal arts is a vital part of our future, and yet we know that's the case, but it's a tough sell. We see an increase of attitude, well, I'm a self-made person, and of course that's not true, and the political polarization. Pew last year did a national survey and found 61% of the public said that higher education was going in the wrong direction. And that was particularly strong among Republicans, but it's also a majority of Democrats feel that way. And interestingly, a group of Democrats that feel the strongest about going in the wrong direction are young people. And so you're seeing that political base that Paul is working with kind of eroding. And it's a grassroots effort that Emma is talking about that we have to turn around. Because the costs, the people think, well, the costs have really increased because of tuition, and debt has increased, and it's really something wrong with the higher ed system. Well, the actual cost for instruction is adjusted annually for a CPI is about the same as it was 25 years ago. So it's other things that are affecting the total bill. So these forces have combined into higher education advocates and business leaders to look at a slightly different model. And that's what I'm going to turn this over to Mike Dempsey. One of the things that was created with Margaret Spelling with great support by Lou Bissett was the My Future NC, which was a statewide commission of leaders to look at how we can increase the number of people with post-secondary degrees. And we created then, are in the process of creating a local group to implement this. And I'm going to save my voice and turn it over to Mike Dempsey. Mike is the regional coordinator for Lenore-Ryan University. He's in charge of the Asheville office, and he's kind of chairing our local effort. So, Mike, there you go.
Thank you very much, Bill. Yeah, I am the only person who is perhaps, well, not affiliated, but I'm with a private university, so I don't want to fool you. I do not represent a public school. However, today I don't come to you as a representative necessarily of Lenore-Ryan, although I always am that, but of the My Future NC effort we have here in town. We do not have an R1 university in Asheville, and that's probably, everybody knows that. And for a few years I've been thinking, how can we get together and work together and make this place a better place to live and help the people of our area more? And lo and behold, My Future NC came out, and there's nice pictures of Jack Cecil and I. We have worked together for about 6 months now because, as Mr. Fulton said, we have My Future NC, but there's no plan. How lovely is that, right? We have decided that locally we'd like to devise a plan, if possible. And so we have formed the Land of Sky Educational Attainment and Workforce Collaborative, we're calling it. It covers these 4 counties. In the Land of Sky region, the Land of Sky Regional Council covers these counties: Buncombe, Madison, Transylvania, and Henderson. There are 8 private schools, private colleges rather, in those 4 counties. That includes branch campuses. There are 5 K-12 systems, and there are 2 public universities. Western Carolina, of course, has their Biltmore Park campus, and then the UNC-Asheville, and then we have I'm missing something. I'm not sure what it. Oh, community colleges. Thank you, whoever said that. Two Blue Ridge Community College and AB Tech, all working together, hopefully, on this initiative. It's brand new, by the way. We're at a crossroads with leadership in our area, and these are the colleges and school systems who have new leadership. And so we feel like it's a kind of a watershed moment in our history and a great time to grab onto the notion of us all working together toward an educational attainment goal here in our area. You can see who what these schools are. They do include, of course, UNC-Asheville. Dr. Cable is very supportive of this effort, and she is now on our advisory steering committee, I'm very happy to say, and we are very blessed to have her leadership. We have formed, as I said, a steering committee, and we're meeting tomorrow. Tomorrow is our first full meeting of the steering committee. I'm going to tell you who's on that. Obviously, we're very sensitive about geography. One thing this cannot be is an Asheville initiative. It's got to be a full 4-county initiative, and that's going to be interesting politically. It's going to be interesting on a lot of levels, communication-wise, et cetera. So we have gathered 4 different types of leaders. We have a K-12 leader, we have a private university leader, a public university leader, and a community college president. And you can see the areas that they represent geographically on the list. We also weaved in the economic development people from our 4 areas. You can see them here. We're looking forward to getting together with them. We've met with them privately. Bill and I have been on the grand tour. I will tell you that the core group, the 5 people who get together and talk about this a lot are myself, Bill, Jack Cecil, who is the president of Biltmore Farms, Laura Leatherwood, who is the president of Blue Ridge Community College, and Nathan Ramsey, who is the chair of the Workforce Development Board and a former county commissioner, former chair of the Buncombe County Commissioners for 8 years, a few years back. We also are bringing business to the table, and this is going to be very, very important. We need to understand what business leaders want for us to, and perhaps I may have skipped over and glazed over the fact, although Mr. Fulton did mention it, the state would like to see 2 million credentialed people by the year 2030. That's a high quality credential. That means a community college degree, a workforce, working place certified credential that has value, or a 4-year degree. We are now at 1.4 million people in North Carolina, and if we continue on a trajectory to 2030, we'd get to 1.6 if we just sat here and watched the river flow by, as Bob Dylan used to say. So we are going to, as a state, going to try to boost this attainment goal, and I've got a philosophy degree, so I can jab at philosophy majors all day long. We're not looking for philosophy majors necessarily, although they're cool too, but we're going to the business people and asking them, what are the skills that you want? And that's where I come back to liberal arts, because we talk about soft skills a lot, don't we? And well-roundedness. So it's not just training credentials that we're looking at, but well-rounded people who will do well in society. So we have these 4 business leaders. I'm really proud to have this team of dynamic leaders. Michael McGuire works for Thermo Fisher Scientific. He's their vice president of global operations. Chip Gould is a man who has businesses in, I think, all 4 counties, so he's a special person. Mike Hawkins is the chair of the Transylvania County Commissioners, but he's also a businessman with diverse interests. And then Jonathan Zuch is he runs Advanced Super Abrasives in Madison County. That's an advanced manufacturing firm. Essentially, this is our plan in a nutshell. We are, again, going to get this steering committee together. We had a meeting today with a man named Terry Holliday, who is the former chair of education, or commissioner of education in the state of Kentucky, who lives in Fairview, to talk about how we can develop credentials locally, perhaps, or we need to work on data. If you know anything about the data systems in North Carolina, they don't talk to each other. Power School doesn't talk to the community college system. Power School is the K-12. K-12 doesn't talk to community college doesn't talk to the UNC system. So the data is kind of broken in UNC, and we're trying to think about how perhaps we can even think about a model locally, which is a bit of a stretch, I got to tell you, but you got to dream big, don't you, if you're gonna change things. I must have mentioned that the Belk Endowment is very involved in this. We presented in Charlotte twice to the Belk Endowment, and they are going to fund this initiative. So we're going to have a year it's a planning grant that they're going to give us for a year to gather constituents, gather stakeholders together to talk about how we might accomplish this. We're probably going to employ a person to facilitate all of this so that they can gather people together and get them talking and do a gap analysis of what the needs are in our area, and also what all of the great things that are happening in our area. I worked at AB Tech for 12 years. You're talking about dual enrollment, early college, all of these initiatives, apprenticeships. We need to bring these things together so that we can figure out what our little slice of the attainment goal will be, and then we will be a model for the state, which I'm really thrilled about, because typically models come out of Raleigh or Charlotte. We're going to try to do it here in the mountains and then spread our model to the rest of the state for the overall My Future goal. Thank you very much.
Who has a question?
Hey, I'm Mars. I'm a student here at UNC-Asheville, and I also work at OLLI. What do we think accounts for the public hostility towards post-secondary education amongst younger Democrats?
Emma?
So we get a lot of feedback, as you can imagine, on our, because we use social media, and people love social media, and they like to comment, and they like to share their opinion. Some of the feedback, anecdotal, I don't have any scientific data to tell this, but for young people, it's the cost. It's the cost of college. There's a concern that maybe they're not getting the value they're supposed to get. We did have some research recently that people who graduate from the UNC system, they tend to value their education and say that it was worth it, but the younger you go, the less they value it. They're saying it wasn't worth it. So I'm thinking that the cost of the education, and particularly when people are young in their career, they're not yet seeing all the financial benefits. That's just some of the other hostility we're finding for people who, particularly in rural North Carolina, is that they think it's that higher education institutions are too liberal. A lot of people will say we'll post something and we'll talk about how wonderful the opportunity is, and they'll say, higher education equals liberal indoctrination. So then we spend a lot of time educating them about the fact that, it's not liberal indoctrination, all people's opinions are valued. And after me being a graduate of Duke University, and I look at some of the people in the current administration, there's not that bias. We graduate all kinds of people through the university system. So I think it's a matter of making sure that we are connecting with them with content that is localized, which is what we found. If we put somebody from Raleigh on there into, Transylvania County, they're like, they don't care who that is. But if we go in and we get somebody from Transylvania County who's benefited from higher education, they're going to listen to that voice. So part of it is, there's a feeling that the elites are trying to dictate to me. So for younger people, it's cost, and for people, particularly in rural counties, it's elitism and liberalism.
Another question?
I'm going to tell them about Emma and I were visiting this guy in Wilmington, and his daughter was going to college, and he ended up saying that she was going to go to Dartmouth because Chapel Hill was too liberal, and Emma about jumped out. I said, Lord have mercy, Dartmouth, the most liberal university. So to a great deal, it's perception. But no, he was going to send her up to Dartmouth, which was, so
To what extent have you been able to mobilize the corporate leaders of the nation, the press of the nation, to focus upon our issue here in North Carolina?
Well, that's been one disappointment for me, and Paul can probably address it better because he knows more of these people. But when I saw this happening, and I wrote some op-eds 2 or 3 years ago about the politicization of the Board of Governors, and we needed to do something about it. And really, I don't recall a lot of support from the business community of North Carolina to do anything about that. And I still haven't seen that, other than people like Paul and a few individuals. But, you know, when I was coming along, there was Hugh McCall and there were these people, and I always felt like if they saw something like this happening, they'd step in and do something. Now, I think that has changed because I haven't seen it, but I'll let Paul.
I think Lou's right. But a good example of it is your North Carolina Chamber is of no help at all. Your North Carolina Chamber has been focused, I would say, almost solely on tax cuts. Now I had a member of the House, Republican, and I had breakfast with from Scythe County. I had breakfast with about a month ago. A part of the bill you have today, before that it's been hung up in all this, has a elimination of franchise tax for corporations, which I think is like 200. It's a significant number anyway. And he was telling me, and he said they had a consultant in there that had told him franchise tax is the most predictable tax you have in the whole repertoire. It does not change with the economy. And there had been zero demand to eliminate it, but we eliminated it anyway. And he said, and this is a Republican member of the House, so I don't know, there's been such a focus on tax reduction that we've ignored some of the, things like infrastructure, things like education, things like health care that are vitally important to the people of these states. I think Lou's right. The one thing I have seen corporate America get behind is PreK. But they still have not been able to move the needle enough. But the corporate leaders have really gotten, which is vitally important. PreK could answer a lot of your both social and economic. But it's a good point. I can't explain it.
We've had some luck. We've had one of the things Paul did with respect to governance a year and a half ago was when we saw what was happening with Margaret Spellings. He got 10 former members of the Board of Governors to write an op-ed talking about the turmoil and the politicization. And that got picked up by the News and Observer. It got republished by all the area newspapers. What we're finding is the coverage for education, the news coverage for education, newspapers have downsized so much because of what's happening with social media that they don't cover it as in depth. In fact, Jane Stansel, who used to be the person at the NNO who covered education across the state, she now works for the community college system as their communications person. So there's been a lot less coverage, which is the void that we've been trying to fill. And we do find that if we can get an op-ed out there signed by, these were 10 members of the Board of Governors who Paul has that network, thankfully, was able to get very prominent business people and executives in the state to sign this op-ed, and it got picked up across the state.
But I don't know why, but you take when Apple was seeking for their second headquarters, Virginia made a major investment in Northern Virginia, D.C. area that reestablished a campus of Virginia Tech in there with a focus on engineering to accommodate them. I don't know.
One of the things I'd like to stress about this local initiative is we're working with the business leaders and we're going to try and do something locally. And one of the things we found nationwide when I got into this Ask You task force was the standard advice we got was you can't count on the federal government to deliver. You can increasingly not count on the state government, and you increasingly have to rely on local people, and it has to be done as a region, not individual cities. And so what we're attempting, and Mike was very articulate about this, what we're attempting to do is to kind of do it locally. And we're going to need help from the state, I think, as we look at funding formulas and all that. But it should be very interesting to see whether we can get that business community locally engaged in the endeavor.
One more question.
Yeah, I want to go back to your question. I was blessed to have a very good education at a very good liberal university, so I'm grateful for that. That was 40
liberal arts university.
I guess. Mixed, yeah. But that was 40 years ago.
Did you say
what-
4 years ago?
40. And what I hear and read about so-called liberal education today, I wouldn't support it for a second. I know what liberal education used to be. You used to learn how to think, how to confront people who disagree with you, and how to argue with them. Never attack them, never forbid them to speak on campus, never allow fascist groups like Antifa to do what they do on campuses. The schools seem to endorse all this crap now. So so-called liberal education is now the absolute antithesis of what it was 40 years ago. PC, identity politics, safetyism, for God's sake. You're not supposed to be safe intellectually. You're supposed to be able to confront and argue with people by first being able to state their argument in a way that they agree does justice to it. That's dead in the liberal education that I hear about on television and read about. I understand some of the background of it. You all know, probably all of us know, the 1952 essay on the two cultures. And even back then, Snow was saying, and here he was a scientist and a novelist, was saying those two cultures can't talk to each other anymore. The liberal arts culture has lost contact with the real earth. They don't have a foot that touches earth. They can't communicate.
So what is your question, sir?
The question is going to be, does anyone think anything can be done to teach people in liberal arts how to communicate and get a foot on the real earth instead of being so seduced by grand abstractions that they no longer can touch the earth? Thank you.
Well, I'll jump into that in the sense that I had lunch today with a UNCA student, the senior who's graduating, and I asked him this question because I was intrigued about that split from the Pew poll. In fact, among the Democrats, 73% said there was healthy questioning and debate on a college campus compared to 17% of the Republicans. I mean, in the polling, the split is so huge. So I was asking this student, I said, what's your take on all this? And he said it was very interesting. He said that he felt robust conversation, but what students were watching for was the physical reaction to students' conservative views, and that there's the reaction to it, not that they were making a sales pitch for their point of view, but they weren't adequately responding to some of these conservative. Now, having recognized that, I think that is very much overblown. These are maybe 5 issues of the last year that this has emerged on major university campuses. Most universities go about their business, and the university has to be a place for uncomfortable conversations. It has to be the place of free thinking, and that's a major fundamental function of what we're all about. I was president at Utah Valley University when Michael Moore showed up back in 2004, and all hell broke loose. We got 1,200 letters and emails and threats and everything else, and a movie was made. I'm actually in a movie if you want to really watch some great video. And it was all about, it's called This Divided State, and it was about the war that broke out when Michael Moore came in to talk about the election. And people were so wound up about it. But if you say no, if you start saying no to people that come on campus, you're just contributing in very significant ways. And so we defended Michael Moore showing up on campus. We also defended the following week Sean Hannity showing up on campus. You would not be surprised, they were entirely different crowds. We had 8,000 people for Michael Moore and 8,000 people for Sean Hannity. And it was, I'd only been there 3 months. And that was an inauguration as being president out there, because everybody had to weigh in and have their opinion. And being from Michigan, and Michael Moore always had the Michigan State hat. Remember that hat? So the local talk shows talked about Cedarburg had brought Michael Moore in to liberalize Utah. I said, I don't think that's me. But it was really part of this culture war. But I think it's overblown, and I think that 95% of the students going through higher ed are not bothered by it and are frankly enriched by some confrontation that goes on. I must say, another conversation I had at that time, a foundation board member asked me, I said, my son's getting ready to go to college. He said, how safe is your campus? And I said, we haven't had a crime there in 10 years. I mean, we did a survey and only 11% of the students at my school drank alcohol. I mean, it was about the safest place you could imagine. So I said, it's very safe. He said, I don't mean that. He said, I mean, is it safe from being exposed to unfriendly ideas? And I said, no, that's what we're kind of there for. And so he didn't send his son there. He sent him to more.
I'm optimistic like Bill. I mean, if you go to these campuses, most kids, like when we were in school, they're there trying to get their degree. They want to get a good job. They want to go to the football game on Saturday. And I was in school during the Vietnam War, and I mean, there were a lot of liberal people around during that time, but the world didn't come to an end. I mean, colleges are, I think, naturally lean that way. I think when you're younger, you do lean that way, but it to me, it all seems to wash out in the end. But I think the newspaper coverage overblows it.
You know, it's hard for me to answer because I personally I've experienced. I've had 6 grandchildren in Chapel Hill. I questioned them all on about it. They did what Lou said. They went in, they studied, they got the degree. They just weren't exposed to it. When I was dean of the business school, and that's some time ago, I never heard it. I used to meet with students every Friday, so I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I think the impact of it is vastly overblown from what you really. You go talk to students. Tim Moore, who I said was a good friend of mine, was telling me recently what he experienced at Chapel Hill. He said he had one professor that, probably was a little bit on the left, but he said we had an interesting dialogue. So I don't know. I have a hard time answering because I just have not personally experienced it with my children or grandchildren or my own experience there.
But something's going on sociologically, because if you look at voting behaviors, your strongest democratic voting behavior emanates from all the university campuses, and it gets increasingly conservative as it gets into the outlying areas. And that's throughout the entire nation. So the most democratic voting bloc is right around Ann Arbor, Michigan, East Lansing, Michigan next. And the student was telling me that same phenomena is true here in North Carolina. That if you take a look and draw at each of the universities, and then
and they're mainly in the urban areas too.
So at any rate, I think there's something sociologically going on, and I don't think it's the faculty member in the classroom as much as people are hunting for scapegoats for different things. And I think that's a convenient one.
Well, from just one more comment. So Stephen Miller graduated from my undergrad, Duke. Steve Bannon graduated from my business school, Harvard. Harvard is considered one of the most liberal campuses on earth. And those, we produce a very conservative person and lots of other conservative people. My children, when they were in college recently, one just graduated in May from Duke. They did from Duke and from Elon. The one that went to Elon thought Elon was very conservative. In Elon, I think it's the middle of the road. The one that went to Duke thought that he felt that there were a lot of extreme right-wing people because there was a noose hung on the campus. One of the things that I'm seeing is that the extremists have gotten more vocal and more visible, and they're pulling people in that direction. And as people are being forced to try to identify as conservative, it used to be, conservative versus liberal or conservative versus progressive. Now you've got both polars pulling on each other. So I think there's a tendency for people to not want to be associated with the extremes. And a lot of the conservatives that I know don't want to be perceived as out there, so they don't even talk about their perspective because they feel like they're going to get shouted out or drowned down. And I don't think that is the case on campus. I think that on the campuses that I've seen with my kids who just recently went through this, there are both points of view. There are people of all different persuasions. Most of the people come from families who have means, can send their kids to college. I just showed you the numbers. A lot of those people are conservative. If their children are on campus and not speaking up, I don't know why, but a lot of those views are represented on campus. So I don't think it probably is not as bad as it was in the 60s and 70s when we had the riots of 67 and all of that stuff happening in the 60s and 70s. I don't think it's as bad as it was then. But I think it's because we got social media and we hear about these, things happening that people think that it's indoctrination, but I don't think indoctrination is happening.
I think at least the public perception of it is far less optimistic than I'm hearing.
Okay, well, we've had a very healthy discussion tonight. I want to thank you all for being here. I would say what I've heard is that this problem is very serious, and it's going to take both private businesses, private citizens, and probably a change of leadership in Raleigh to make something happen. So I think there's a part for all of us. If you would thank our speakers with me, please. Thank you all for coming tonight.
Good job.
Great job. Seeing you.
Good job, Bill. We got boys. Good. You got cranked up there at the end. Everything was coming.
Hey, you want to watch a Flynn video? And this kid from Brigham Young University made a movie about that conference. We had a wild time,
Hey, Lynn.
You said something about UNC is